Final thing we're going to cover is the accent of the voice. I have been, and to be honest, still often am, self-conscious about my accent. I'm Scottish, born in Scotland, raised in Scotland. I've lived here my whole life. I see myself as Scottish. That's part of my identity, part of my culture, part of who I am. But I don't sound Scottish. And that's something that's really annoyed me for a lot of my life. When I was at school, it was something I often got bullied for not sounding Scottish. And it's something that really frustrates me because I've never seen myself as anything else, but I don't have that Scottish accent that people traditionally associate with someone who lives in this country. Now, I know that for many of you, English is not your first language. And even if English is your first language, you speak it with an accent. So here's the thing about accents. So many of us get self-conscious about them, but accents are a natural part of speaking in language. For example, here in the UK, we have about 40 different accents. So people in different parts of the UK sound completely different. Whether you've got someone in Scotland, whether you've got someone in the northwest of England, sounds different from the northeast of England, sounds different from the south of England, sounds different to someone from Wales, sounds different to someone from Ireland. Two parts of Scotland sound really different to each other. There is no one Scottish accent. There is no one British accent. We have North Americans in the room. We have Canadians. We've got Americans. And we all sound different to how someone from Australia and New Zealand might sound. So even when English is your first language, you have an accent. And when English is your second language, you will have an accent from your first language. And a lot of the time, I work a lot with people who are international, people who are English is not their first language. And a lot of the time they get really self-conscious about their accent. They ask me, oh, David, how do I change my accent? How do I sound more neutral? And as someone who's wanted to change his accent for a long time and someone who's been really self-conscious about their accent, I say you do not want to change your accent. Your voice sounds the way that it's meant to. We are running an international webinar right now. Can you imagine if I had a really strong, really dialected Scottish accent? Would those of you tuning in from the US, would those of you tuning in from Sweden, would those of you tuning in from Germany, would those of you tuning in from Greece be able to understand me? Probably not, right? So what I've realized is that although I didn't have the voice I wanted to have when I was growing up, I've got the voice I needed to have to do the work I'm passionate about, to be able to speak to international audiences, to be able to teach people in countries all over the world, because I do have that softer, more neutral voice that doesn't really have much of an accent to it. So it's something that I've come to terms with, that actually it's not what I asked for, but it's what I needed. And I still get to celebrate and enjoy my Scottish culture, and I still get to express my Scottish identity. You know, you've got the flippant hill walking map behind me. When I put on my kilt, I've got my McRae clan tartan kilt. Like, I still get to be Scottish. I don't need to have a Scottish accent in order to express that part of myself. Your accent and your voice expresses who you are. It expresses your culture. It expresses your identity. And remember at the beginning, we talked about what makes you unique as a speaker. That is part of your uniqueness. When you bring in that cultural element to what you're speaking about, when you talk about, well, this was my perspective and my understanding in terms of where I grew up, in terms of the culture that I grew up in, even in terms of the subtleties and nuance of language. When you speak more than one language, there are things that you can better express in one language. There are things you can better express in the other language. And knowing both of them gives you the best of both worlds. If you speak more than two languages, well, you have that richer and deeper experience of how you communicate and how you get a message across. So you do not want to change your accent. If your accent means that you're pronouncing words or you are using lingo that makes it difficult for you to be understood, that's where you want to think about it. You want to go, okay, I want to make sure that I'm pronouncing words clearly. I want to be mindful perhaps of any kind of regional slang that I might be using. I think I did this on last week's session, didn't I? I said something like, what was it, giving it the big un or something like that. So I used some kind of Scottish idiom and going, wait, hang on, that's not going to translate for my international audience. I need to explain what that is. So as long as you are pronouncing words in a way that makes you understood clearly, and as long as you're being mindful of not using slang that people can't understand, or if you do use some kind of slang or native term, you explain it. You say, okay, we have this great term in Spanish. It's this, and this is what it means. And that gives you a uniqueness. That gives you a dimension that other speakers won't have. So I think this is a really important point to wrap up on. And I know it's not like a technique, and I know it's not a technical thing, but when we're talking about voice, a lot of the voice is psychological. It's this idea that we don't want to speak up. It's the idea that we don't feel that our voice has been heard in the past, that we don't think that we are worthy of speaking up, that people won't listen to our voice. So the technical stuff is all well and good, and we do want to build and develop that. But I think the psychology of voice is even more important, because there are a lot of people through history whose voices have not been encouraged. So basically, if you're not someone who looks like me, white, straight male, at some point in history, your voice was not appreciated and your voice was not valued. If you were a woman, historically, women's voices were not appreciated. If you're a person of color, historically, your voice was not appreciated. If you're LGBT, at some point in history, your voice was not appreciated. And still, even today, there are barriers and obstacles to those voices being heard and appreciated. And it's that psychological block and societal baggage that we so often need to push through in order to get those messages out there, in order to speak up for important causes. So this, I think, is the most important part of what we talk about today. I know you're coming here wanting the techniques and the strategies, and all of that is good. We can talk techniques and strategies, but I want to wrap up by saying that your voice has value. Your voice needs to be heard, and don't be afraid to speak up and use it, because there's people out there who need to hear what you have to say. What you've just seen there is a snippet of my Amplify online course. Amplify, Spark Your Speeches, helps aspiring speakers to create engaging content and deliver it effectively. It's a step-by-step program that guides you through your speaking journey at your own pace. It's a series of live workshop recordings. So you get to have the interactive experience of being in that live setting, but you get to do it on your own time. No worrying about time zones, schedules, all of that kind of fluff. There's lots of additional learning resources in the course that complement and add to the workshops that you go through. It's a 12-month program, and you can access the course in the first month for a $1 trial. So you get to come into the program, see what it's all about, and see if it's going to be right for you and your speaking development. To access your $1 trial, I've put the link in the description below. If you click that link, go through to our course homepage, and at checkout, enter the code YouTube, that's where you've come from, to get your first month for a $1 trial. Click the link in the description below, and I look forward to seeing you in the course.